What's up guys, you are watching Westside Pickleball and today I am bringing you a paddle that is very exciting. This is the unreleased Ruby Pro from 6-0. I have been dying to show this to you guys. I've only been able to show you a little bit, but now I'm finally gonna be able to give you my first impressions on the paddle, and I've got a lot to say about this one. So let's go ahead and get straight into it. So starting off with the price, this is gonna be $200 on launch date. If I'm not mistaken, the launch date is gonna be October 12th, so keep your eye out for that. It's gonna be $200, but if you use code WestsidePB, you'll get 10% off. That'll drop the price down to $180, which I think is pretty competitive compared to all the other paddles in the market right now. So starting off with what everybody is dying to know, is this a powerful paddle? I think the answer is yes, kinda. It's not very convincing. It's not a very convincing yes, but let me explain, okay? So yes, it is a power paddle. I would say that it's not at the top tier. I did a couple comparisons between the boomstick, between my Huarache X, between a couple of other foam paddles as well. And I would say it hangs in there, but it's definitely not at the top of its game right now. From what I've heard, this is actually a pretty big jump up from the original Ruby, so that's always good to see. But this paddle has a lot more going for it than just the power, and we'll get to that in just a little bit. Because it's a 14 millimeter, it is gonna have some pretty decent pop. Again, it's nothing, mind-blowing or anything like that. It's gonna be about average for a power paddle, which is to be expected at this point. I think the paddle does better in power than it does in pop, in my opinion. I just found that it was easier to drive the ball, and it just felt a lot more clean to hit my shots compared to when I was running up to the net and I was just hitting some speed ups or blocking shots. It didn't seem that effective compared to like a boomstick or maybe even a Pro 4 Inferno. It was okay at the net. I found that the strengths were really towards the baseline when I was driving it. That's when I really felt in my comfort zone. This is a hybrid, so it's gonna be a little bit more different than what I'm used to. I'm used to elongated paddles. And so if you're used to elongated paddles and you're having that longer handle and generating more power because of that longer handle, is not gonna be the case with the Ruby Pro. It's not a short handle by any means, but it is gonna be shorter than your typical elongated handle. Now, I'm not too sure if this is a Gen 2 or a Gen 3. This is definitely not a Gen 4, all right? It still has a honeycomb in the center, but there's a couple of things that when I was looking at it, it's got some really interesting features that I have not received any clarity on just yet. I wanna say it's Gen 2, but it's a very advanced Gen 2. Don't think Gen 2 like, 2 years ago. This is like a completely different Gen 2 than what I'm used to. So I think if you're looking for this paddle to be the ultimate power paddle, it's definitely not gonna be it, but it is gonna be a pretty good contender. If you're a hardcore 6-0 fan, or you just really loved the Ruby and you wanted a little extra juice, then this is definitely gonna be something to consider. Now, what I really wanna talk about more than anything is how this paddle just feels overall. There's a lot to talk about when it comes to the feel of the paddle, because like I said, this does not feel like your typical Gen 2 or Gen 3. The best way I can describe this is like a muted Gen 2. It still has that kind of like loud smack, but it's dulled down. It's kind of dialed back a little bit. So when I was testing it out compared to like other Gen 2s, like this Pop and Frost right here, this is a Gen 2 paddle. This paddle has a really loud smack, like a classic, Gen 2 cracking noise when you smack that ball on a drive. Sounds really good, feels really good. It feels like that, but it just has like this dampened feel on top of it as well. And so because of that, it almost leads to like less feel on your paddle when you're dinking and when you're driving, and just basically any other shot that you're making, you don't feel the ball as much. Now, this can be a good thing or a bad thing, again, based on what you prefer. I think that's just what it really comes down to nowadays, is that a lot of paddles are so good. Like any paddle that you pick nowadays is gonna be a really solid option. But now I think it just really boils down to what kind of paddle do you prefer? Do you prefer one that is more muted? Do you prefer one that's more stiff? Do you prefer one that's a little bit softer, has a lot of dwell time? Like, what do you prefer? Like the market can just give you whatever you want. So in this case, I would classify this as a more muted Gen 2 paddle. So if you can kind of imagine that, try your hardest. That's kind of what the Ruby Pro feels like. It has a lot of technology in there that kind of assists with that feeling. And so if you don't like muted feels, then maybe the Ruby Pro is not gonna be for you. Now, there's a lot of new technologies that 6-0 has implemented into this paddle. There's like a whole bunch of them right here on the corner. You guys can see there's just like a whole bunch of different trademarks that they're making, a whole bunch of different patent pending technologies that they've already shoved in this paddle. And so all these things are contributing to the way that the paddle feels. Now, me personally, when I first started playing with it, I was like, oh man, I'm not gonna like this paddle. And right now, I can still say that I don't really like the way this paddle feels. I just don't. I don't like muted paddles. Like I don't like it having a dampened feeling. Now it's not as muted as like maybe like a Genesis or maybe even like the Enhanced 4.5. To me, those felt like very muted and they were also very stiff. It kind of falls in that category, but it's not as bad as those in my opinion. But it's still not my cup of tea. I like a paddle that gives me feedback, that tells me what kind of shot I just hit, if it was off-centered or if it was dead center. And this one doesn't do the best job at that. It's not terrible, but it's kind of like in this in-between, this really weird in-between stage. And so when I first started playing with this paddle, I really wanted to like it, but for me, to connect with a paddle, I have to like the way it feels first. If I don't like the way it feels, then I'm probably not gonna perform well with the paddle. Even if it's a great paddle, if I just don't like the way it feels, if I can't connect with the paddle, I'm just not gonna do good with it. But for whatever reason, this Ruby Pro, I just did good with it. Like a lot of the games that I was playing, I was just playing good. And it was really weird because I felt disconnected to the paddle, but the paddle was performing. Like it was doing what it was supposed to do. And it was a really weird experience for me because technically speaking, I was supposed to be doing bad. Like out of all my past experiences, I was never doing good with paddles that I felt disconnected to. I just wasn't. But for this one, whatever it was, I don't know what the reason was, but I just performed really well with the Ruby Pro. Some other things to consider when it comes to paddle feel, because this is a 14 millimeter, you're kind of already thinking like it's gonna have more feedback, it's gonna feel a little bit more stiff, but some of the other technologies that they put inside this Ruby Pro kind of negate that feeling. It doesn't have that jarring feeling from a 14 millimeter or some other thinner paddles because of the way that they laid the aramid fiber or the Kevlar on top. And they're also using thicker cell sizes. So that's also supposed to kind of pocket the ball and allow the ball to kind of dwell on the face just a little bit longer. So they're kind of like counteracting it. Like even though it's a 14 millimeter, they're doing a couple of other things that make it feel like a 16 millimeter, or at least supposed to feel like a 16 millimeter. Now on top of that, there are a couple other technologies in here that just kind of dampen the way that it feels in the paddle face and also in the paddle handle. You can't really feel the vibrations. I can best relate to it when we're playing, if you ever played with a Lux 2.0. The Lux 2.0, you can still feel the ball, but you don't really feel the vibrations come down to the handle. In the same way the Ruby Pro does something similar to that. I think the Lux 2.0 absorbs the ball feel a little bit more, but this Ruby Pro does a good enough job. And out of all the new patents that they put inside the Ruby Pro, nothing had me more excited than the surface texture that they were using on the face of the paddle. And I'm not talking about the Kevlar. I'm talking about the added grit that they put, which is called their Diamond Tough Grit. Dude, I don't know how this is legal. I'm glad it is because it makes the paddle a lot more fun and it gives it like a totally different dynamic that I've never played with before. But I don't know how they were able to get this to pass. This is crazy stuff, guys. Like it's called Diamond Tough, okay? I really want to talk about it more, but just know the name is very self-explanatory. I'm gonna put some pictures on the screen of what the grit looks like on the Ruby Pro compared to a couple other paddles. So I have the Ruby Pro. I also have the Pop and Tango, which is another Kevlar paddle. And then I'm also gonna put up the Boomstick Grit. On the Pop and Tango, you can see that the aramid fiber is pretty gritty, like it's very defined, it's not flattened out at all. And then for the Boomstick, you can see it almost looks like little granules or rocks. Now for the Ruby Pro, it's like combining both of those things. It has the aramid fiber, which is already gritty, but then it also has its own added texture as well. They look like little rocks on there and you can see them on the paddle. Like if I look closely, there's like these little things that like sparkle and shine. It almost looks like these really tiny, tiny white specks. They're all over the paddle. And my gosh, you put your hand on here, like, my goodness, my hand can't even scrape across the paddle. I am like putting all my pressure with my hand to try to rub my hand across the face. Now they're making some pretty bold claims. Long story short, this is supposed to last even longer than Infinigrit. Now this is already way grittier than Infinigrit. Like Infinigrit feels very, very fine. It almost feels like really fine sandpaper. This feels like the lower numbers of sandpaper. Like this feels like 80 level sandpaper. It's crazy, man. This stuff like just grabs onto your skin and it really bites into the ball. Just from like my first impressions about how gritty it is, this is miles ahead of the Infinigrit surface. Like the Infinigrit surface is not bad. It still has its grit. It still holds up really, really well. I'm a big fan of the Infinigrit, but this is on another level because this is already grittier. And if this can last even longer than Infinigrit, and if you keep in mind, Infinigrit is supposed to last 3 times longer than carbon fiber. So if this can last even longer than that, while keeping the same grit levels throughout the lifespan, my gosh, I think this is a huge, huge breakthrough. I'm also gonna be keeping a very close eye on how this Diamond Tough texture lasts, because I've done some pretty extensive tests on how the Infinigrit texture had lasted. It held up really, really good. So I'm gonna hold it under the same scrutiny. I'm really gonna put this to the test. And I like this paddle anyway, so I'm gonna keep on playing with it regardless. I think now a lot of other companies are gonna start coming out with their own grits, where it's just gonna be like something that's supposed to last 3 times, 4 times, 5 times longer than carbon fiber. And I'm really excited to see what some of these other companies are gonna do, like Yola, 11624, Enhance. Eventually it's gonna be like the foam cores, where carbon first came out with their foam core, and then like a huge wave of them just hit afterwards. I think it's gonna be the same thing with this. Now, although this paddle is pretty good and I'm enjoying it very much, I do have a couple of complaints and questions about the Ruby Pro. My first main question, why did you not make this a foam core paddle? I don't know why. I think this would sell way better, if this had a solid foam core in the center with like a foam core ring around it. I think that would have just sold like crazy, man. You could have charged like $250, $280 for that paddle, and it would have sold even better. The grit combined with that foam core dwell time, woof, that spin's gonna be disgusting. I could have just imagined it with a foam core. Dang, man. I think 6.0 really missed out on making a really solid foam core paddle, but I don't know. I think they have something in the works about another foam core paddle coming out. Maybe they didn't want 2 foam core paddles coming out. They want to kind of differentiate the Ruby Pro from another one that's gonna be coming out really soon. But I think it would have been a really great option to just go ahead and make this one a foam core too. Now, the reason I say that is because it also would have solved my next problem that I have with the paddle, which is the sweet spot. The sweet spot is not impressive by any means. I actually think it's on the smaller side. I would compare it to like the Carbon Waves 4, maybe around that area. It's not great, but it's not bad. It's just not good compared to the competition. Like the competition right now, they have some really, really solid sweet spots. This sweet spot is very limited to the center. If you're hitting off-centered, you're gonna definitely feel it. That's the only time where it gives you feedback, is when you're hitting off-centered on these edges, then it'll definitely let you know, because your ball will probably die. I think having that foam core definitely would have helped with a sweet spot, because this paddle is gonna suffer with a sweet spot. Now, this is still a hybrid, so technically it should have a better sweet spot than an elongated, but it almost feels like it has an elongated style sweet spot, which is not a good thing. This is also what led me to feel like very disconnected to the paddle. Because it didn't have a good sweet spot, I was hitting off-centered sometimes, or it just added to like the negative feeling of how the paddle felt when I was playing with it. Now, because this had a worse sweet spot, it also led to having a little bit less control than I would have liked. Also, put that on top of the fact that it had a 14mm core instead of a 16mm, you're definitely not gonna get the control that you want. I think if 6.0 would have come out with this like a year ago, this definitely would have been like a #1 seller for sure. But the market that we're living in right now, the competition is like insanely tough. So right now I'm holding this under like really harsh scrutiny, but it's suffering in some categories that other paddles just aren't at all. But that's gonna lead me to the last topic that I wanna talk about, and I'm gonna end it on a good note, which is the spin. This paddle can really slice the ball. If you like to spin the ball, and if you like to slice it on your serves, slice it on your returns, do these backhand cuts or these forehand slices, this paddle is going to be probably your best friend. I made a sandpaper paddle, and I could really disgustingly slice that ball. This was doing almost as good as my sandpaper paddle. You don't need that much dwell time for the ball to spin, because the grit just bites into the ball so much that it's still able to get top spin, to get back spin, to get any kind of spin that you want on the ball. So I was playing with my buddy, and he loves to spin the ball. He spins it like on basically every other shot that he hits, on his serves, on his returns, everything. He loved this paddle. Like, he told me he would personally buy this paddle even without a code for 200 bucks, because he liked it that much. So if you're that kind of player, definitely consider this. I would demo it first and just try it for yourself, man. You really have to just get your hand, put it on here, and just feel the grit, because it's honestly just insane. I'm gonna say it again. I really don't know how this passed any sort of USAPA or UPAA inspection, but it did. I'm glad that it did, because that's awesome. But man, if more companies can do this, it's gonna add a whole other element to the game, because if they're combining that with a foam core, I think that's gonna be a killer paddle. Now, would I spend my own $180 on a brand new Ruby Pro? I think so. I really do think so. I think it's just such a unique, fun, really technologically advanced paddle. But at the same time, there are a couple things that hold me back to where I would feel like, you know what, I don't think I got the best paddle for my money's worth. Would I probably buy some other paddles before this? I think so. But at the same time, I would not be disappointed if all I could buy was a Ruby Pro, even though it's still got a honeycomb core. And even though in some aspects it's lacking, it kind of makes up for it in some of the other ways. So I think it kind of balances out. It's not the best paddle, it's not the worst, but it's definitely unique. And I really like attributes from a paddle where they just stand out. Like, I like a paddle that has insane pop. I like a paddle that has insane spin. I just like paddles that really stand out with just one feature. And for them, I think their standout feature is gonna be their surface grit. I just think it's too crazy good to ignore. And I would be really, really content with this paddle. Are there better options out there? Absolutely. But like I said, if you're a diehard 6-0 fan, definitely give this paddle a try when it comes out, demo it somewhere, find a way to play with it, and just experience it for yourself, because I think the biggest deal breaker is gonna be the way that the paddle feels. I don't think it's gonna be for everybody, especially because everybody's on the foam train right now. People love the way that foam feels. This is definitely gonna feel much different than foam. But that's gonna wrap up this first impressions about the Ruby Pro. What do you guys think about the Ruby Pro? I think it looks absolutely sick. Red and black is so clean. Would you guys pick up a Ruby Pro for $180? Make sure if you guys are purchasing one, you use code WestsidePB to get that 10% off. If you guys like this video, make sure you hit that like button. And if you wanna see more unreleased paddles like the Ruby Pro come to my channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss anything. I'll catch you guys again on the West Side.